breaking my rules here. You shouldn't say any of this stuff. It is.
They're not going to tell anybody.
But I think it's really what's so sad about so much of filmmaking now is there's a kind of predictability to the, you know, it's always put in industrial commercial terms. It's the product. And there's predictability in the product. And that phrase in itself is so killing and destroying. We're trying to entertain people and have some fun and try to be kind of up to professional standards and do something a little different. And it was a low-budget movie. It took us way too long to shoot it, mainly because I think this isn't clear. We had a rather short schedule, and we took forever to make it. And every day we kept thinking, it was really Larry. You know, he's in his aggressive way. He's actually very modest. We were threatened with being shut down 1,000,000 times. The reason we were so slow was the nights in New York. We had a night movie. The nights in New York were very short. That's what really none of us anticipated. You really couldn't get a shot until 10. The sun came up at 5 a.m. or something like that. So and the New York contract at the time was an hour lunch, I think, and they went off. They very often went off. Most of the time we didn't have anything in the budget for a caterer, so the crew would take an hour and go off. But so, you know, it basically was an hour and a half lunch, and you were getting at best a half a day of what we would normally think of a work day in a day. So we weren't, we were falling behind and falling behind. And the movie kept looking crazier and crazier. The studio thought that it was another version of Saturday Night Fever. I'm sure Larry will back me up on this. The biggest reason we got made was because of Saturday Night Fever, which is, I thought, a terrific film. But it was, you know, young people in Brooklyn who were unhappy and not doing well and whatever. This was young people in Brooklyn who had a problem. That's the way the studio looked at it. And, you know, they were kind of seeing these dailies, I guess, and wondering what the hell was going on. Anyway.
Was that just another thing to just set this, you know, like, is there anybody who hasn't seen the movie? Okay, that's good.
Oh,
Interesting.
all right.
Yeah. But like, just to tell us a little bit about the opening scene with all the gangs and where you got those extras from.
I was going to tell you a little bit about, we had one technique that we developed when we were falling more and more behind that Larry could use when he spoke to the studio, which was we knew if we didn't shoot the ending, they couldn't shut us down.
So you shot it pretty much in sequence.
So I kept moving that scene at the beach. Oh, we're going to do that next week. We're going to do that next week. And we kept shooting the scenes we thought we needed until finally we got to the day where the sun comes up and they get home. And when you see the movie, the last shot of the movie is the last shot we shot on the last day of shooting.
Right on.
And then we had a scratch, remember?
Yeah.
Then we got the next day, we got the lab report in, there was a scratch in one of the magazines. But luckily we had a couple of cameras rolling on them as they walk into the sunset. And that was the end.
I was just going to say, tell us a little bit about that, just the opening scene to set it up in terms of the where you sourced all of the extras from, because some of them are real gang members, right?
Yeah, we always went for authenticity. And Wally said, you know, well, if we're going to have this conclave with all these gang members, get me some real gang members. And so we did. And
Very smart.
so they looked
when
real.
you do something stylized, you need the friction of reality to be part of it. That's part of the aesthetic understanding.
Little did we know.
Yeah, little did Frank understand.
Yeah, the extra call was really interesting. Because we kind of, I think it was, we put out this sign, gang members show up. Anybody in a gang, come on down. So, but there were two things. We, for some arbitrary reason, probably budget-wise, we said the gangs could only send 9 members. It's 9.
Wow.
Yeah, it was 9. Yeah. 10 would have put us over budget. So, and then Wallace said, and I don't want them to have any facial hair. Look at these guys. Look, so we had to go around, and a lot of guys came in, and most of them would shave, but we had an incident where one guy wouldn't, and he swung a cane at us, and it got very violent.
Well, we also, the studio, I will share this, the studio felt to aid us in speeding up. They would send an assistant director from Hollywood to go out and come and help us. And it was very, very, very good assistant director, David Sosno. And as you probably know, the immediate person in charge of crowd control